and welcome back to Fun Food and Games. Today we're going to be going over our modern mill deck. Excuse me. It's come to popularity, especially with Modern Horizons 2. Bringing in Counterspell back to the game gives blue and black a little bit of an edge. Blue especially. So we're gonna give a quick rundown. First the mana base, then the main board, then the sideboard, and we'll discuss everything as we go along, the reasons why we have it in the deck, reasons why we don't have other things in the deck. And again, if you find a comment helpful, go ahead and give it a like and subscribe, share it to a friend. I appreciate it. And here we go. All right, first off, we've got 3 snow-covered islands. We're just doing snow-covered because, well, we like snow. Snow is nice, especially here in Oklahoma. We don't get a lot of snow, and when we do, it cools us down. We like it. We've got 2 snow-covered swamps. And speaking of snow stuff, we've got from Ice Age 2 underground rivers. These guys, just mana fixing, give you blue and black, do a little bit of pinging damage. Also gives you the colorless advantage if you just need to tap for colorless. We've got 1 Field of Ruin. Now, I know a lot of people like to run a couple of these guys in there, but I tell you, after you play a few mono white decks, mono red decks, you don't see a whole lot of extra crazy mana bases to destroy a non-basic land in some of those builds. So when I found I was running like 2 or more even, a lot of times these would end up just sitting there. So I decided 1 was enough. Next up, we have 4 Prismatic Vistas. It's going to help us out when we get to the mill cards here. You'll see we're running 8 crabs in the deck. Excuse me, got a little bit of hiccups going on. Next up, we've got 4 Polluted Deltas. Again, crack them, pay 1 life, search your deck for an island or a swamp, put it in the battlefield. And next up, we've got 4 Watery Graves. It's your basic shock land, island, swamp. And last up for the mana base, we've got Oboro, Palace in the Clouds. It's a legendary land to tap and add a blue to your mana pool, or for a colorless, you can return Oboro, Palace in the Clouds to its owner hand, which honestly it comes in handy fairly often, and you don't want to run too many of those, because if you do, you'll legendary rule yourself, of course. And the Oboro, Palace in the Clouds and all those fetches go perfect with our 4 Ruin Crabs. That's right, for 1 mana, you get a 0/3 with landfall whenever land enters the battlefield under your control. Each opponent mills 3 cards. So, next up, we have 4 of our Hedron Crabs. It's a 1 blue for a 0/2 creature, and with landfall, whenever land enters the battlefield under your control, target player puts the top 3 cards of his or her library into his or her graveyard. Now, one key thing about the Hedron Crab to remember is that you are targeting your opponents. So if they are playing Leyline of Sanctity or anything else that gives them hexproof, you have to mill yourself, because you have to target somebody. It doesn't say opponent, but it says target player. So if you only have 1 opponent and you're playing Hedron Crab and they have hexproof, you're milling yourself. So watch out, be careful. All right, next up, we've got 4 Mesmeric Orbs. It's a 2 colorless for an artifact, and whenever a permanent becomes untapped, that permanent's controller mills a card. Again, this is symmetrical. It's going to affect your opponent and you, so having cards in your graveyard for recursion, and also running Loris in the sideboard as your companion, it will help you out quite a bit. We have 1 copy of Maddening Cacophony for 1 and a blue. It's a sorcery that can be kicked for 3 colorless and a blue. Each opponent mills 8 cards if the spell is kicked. Instead, each opponent mills half their library rounded up. You hardly ever get to kick this spell. And if you do, by the time you do kick it, milling half the library isn't going to be as good as it should be. Like it is in Commander, this will help you out way more in Commander than it will in Modern. However, running 1 of these in your main board give you that last little bit extra juice sometimes just to get it out of there. Not only that, Glimpse the Unthinkable is a blue and a black. It's a little harder to pull off. When you're running multiple colors, I find any time that you can keep it simpler and just have 1 color in the casting cost will benefit you in the long run. All right. Next up, we're running 2 counterspells. Like I said, Modern Horizons 2, bringing us back the counterspell. Well, I've got my Tempest copies, and I'm ready to counterspells with them. next up in the main board, we have 2 surgical extractions. For Phyrexian Black Mana, you have an instant that will allow you to target a card in a graveyard other than a basic land card. You can search the owner's graveyard, hand, or library for any number of cards with the same name as that card and exile it. Then that player shuffles their library. You're playing a mill deck, you hit their bombs, get them into their graveyard, remove them with surgical extraction, remove every single one of them from the deck, from their hand. Surgical extraction is where it's at. All right, next up, a little bit of secret tech that I don't see anybody running, especially with the crabs. You would think that Deprive would be the best. I mean, it was before Counterspell, I was running 4 of these in my main board, which would make things a little awkward sometimes. Again, talking about the double blue mana and everything, and trying to make sure I keep the right mana on board all the time. However, if you're running just a mono blue mill deck with the crabs, Deprive is such an overperformer. You'll be returning those cards to your hand, playing a land every single turn. Deprive is an overperformer in mono blue. Playing in the Dimir colors, it still does work, and it'll help you get those lands. Next up, we've got Crypt Incursion, 2 copies in the main board. For 2 colorless and a black, you've got an instant that will exile all creature cards from target player's graveyard. You gain 3 life for each card exiled this way. You're playing mill when you're got a lot of creatures in your opponent's graveyard, especially when you're playing like mono red, anything like that, mono white. There's so many different ones out there, the prowess decks, everything else, with all those creatures in their bin trying to get some life back will help you out, usually because you're probably going to be dealing with 1 or 2 that stuck to the board before you could really deal with it. Speaking of dealing with things, Drown in the Lock, 4 copies, must have. Thank you, Throne of Eldraine, for being way too overpowered. You brought us Drown in the Lock, which has got to be one of the best spells ever printed. For a blue and a black, you have an instant where you can choose, yep, that's modular. You can choose to either target or counter target spell with converted mana cost less than or equal to the number of cards in its controller's graveyard, or you can destroy target creature with converted mana cost less than or equal to the number of cards in its controller's graveyard. Drown in the Lock, so OP. You got to run them in your Dimir Mill decks. You have to. If you're running Ashiok, if you're running crabs, anything like that, Drown in the Lock, that's where you want to be. All right, now to take care of some of those pesky 1-drops and to deal with Wrenn 6 and a few of the other planeswalkers out there, we've got Bloodchief's Thirst. For 1 black, we have a sorcery that can be kicked for 2 colorless and black. Destroy a target creature or planeswalker with converted mana cost 2 or less. If the spell is kicked, you can destroy a target creature or a planeswalker. So Bloodchief's Thirst, that's the one you want to get. We are free. It is our duty to live well. Indeed. All right. Next up, we have Cling to Dust. Cling to Dust, for 1 black mana, you get an instant. Exile target card from a graveyard. It was a creature card. You gain 3 life. Otherwise, you draw a card. And why is my camera not wanting to focus? Focus. Focus. Back it up a little bit. Back it up a little bit more. Turn it. 2? Is it because there's 2? Doesn't know which one to focus on? I'm not sure. Hello? Okay, anyway, I'll just read it for you folks. Cling to Dust, for 1 black, you get an instant. Exile target card from a graveyard. If it was a creature card, you gain 3 life. Otherwise, you draw a card. You can also escape this card. For 3 colorless and black, exile 5 other cards from your graveyard. Like I said, with the amount of mill that you're going to do to yourself, to have the Cling to Dust is going to help out quite a bit. And why won't this focus? That is driving me bananas. That's like as clear as it's get it. Yeah. So, of course, the next one that is in every blue mill deck, Archive Trap. You got to have the trap. Let's see. You gonna focus? You gonna focus? You gonna focus? You gonna focus? Oh, it focused. Look at that. You have to turn it away and bring it back. Archive Trap is an instant, and it's a trap as a tribal. But for 2 blue and 3 colorless, if an opponent searches his or her library this turn, you may pay 0 rather than pay Archive Trap's mana cost. Target opponent puts the top 13 cards of his or her library into his or her graveyard. This is the infamous turn 0 kill if you happen to be living in magical Christmas fairylands magic time. But if you have 4 of these in your opening hand, you're on the draw, your opponent plays a fetch land first off, you play 4 of these, and then before you even start your turn, your opponent's library is completely gone. And by the time they go to untap, the game's already won. They've got no cards left. I don't know of any other combo in Magic that technically lets you turn 0 win. If this is considered a turn 0, because of course your opponent does get to untap, upkeep, and then go to draw on their second turn, and you only had 1 turn. So depending, you could call that a turn 1 or turn 2 or even turn 0 kill, just depending on how technical you want to be about it. All right, getting down to the last bit here. We've got 4 Visions of Beyond. Let's see if the trick works here. Oh, the trick worked. For 1 blue, you get an instant where you can draw a card. If a graveyard has 20 or more cards in it, draw 3 cards instead. Blue, card draw. You love it. In Mill, Visions of Beyond. I mean, you might as well just be playing Legacy. And with this deck, you're going to be able to get the 3 cards easy. All right, and the last 2 cards in the main board. Force of Negation. Thank you, Modern Horizons. I always loved Force of Will as I was a younger man playing the game. And now that Force of Negation's out there, it feels like Christmas comes twice. So for 2 blue and a colorless, you've got an instant. And if it's not your turn, you may exile a blue card from your hand rather than play this spell's mana cost. Counter target non-creature spell. That spell's countered this way. Exile it instead of putting it into its owner's graveyard. Again, for Mill, there's going to be cards that you don't want to go into graveyards. Force Negation is going to take care of that. All right. Next up, we're on to our sideboard. We've got 1 Lurrus of the Den as our companion. For 2 hybrid mana of Orzhov, white and black, and then 1 colorless, you've got a legendary creature, Cat Nightmare. That's a 3/2. And its stipulation as a companion is each permanent card in your starting deck has converted mana cost 2 or less. Ours does. Lurrus also has lifelink, and during each of your turns, you may cast 1 permanent with 1 converted permanent spell with converted mana cost 2 or less from your graveyard. You got to have Lurrus. He's gonna bring you back everything as you're milling yourself, as your opponents are killing your stuff. Lurrus is there to do the job. All right. So we've also running 2 more Blood Chief's Thirst. We covered those in the main board, so I'm not going to go over them too much more. But again, if your opponent's playing heavy planeswalkers, anything like that, lots of little low to the ground creatures, Blood Chief's Thirst can help you clean them out. Speaking of lots of creature going aggro, we've got 2 Extinction Events. Extinction Event is really kind of nice for us, considering all of our creatures are odd. That way, if our opponent's running anything even, we don't even have to sweat it. We can just go ahead and exile all of them. And again, Mill deck, don't want a recursion. So to exile them is going to help you out a lot better. All right. We've got 2 Ratchet Bombs. For 2 colorless, you've got an artifact that you can tap to put a charge counter on Ratchet Bomb. You can also tap to sacrifice Ratchet Bomb and destroy each non-land permanent with converted mana costs equal to the number of charge counters on Ratchet Bomb. When you were playing Bogles or anything like that, lots of low to the ground, 1-drops, things of that nature, this will come in handy. This can save you out for so many things, even 0 mana cost and stuff. With all the affinities that are out there, Welding Jar and all that type of stuff, it's all going to Memnites, everything. You drop one of these guys, you don't have to put any counters on it. You just, boom, you wipe out Affinity's board. All right. So we're also running 2 more Surgical Extractions in the sideboard. Is it going to do it this time? Ooh, kind of. Ooh, maybe just as like Surgical Extraction. It's too dark of a card. But run 2 more of those in our sideboard. Also in the sideboard, we've got 2 Profane Mementos. Profane Memento. For 1 colorless, you get an artifact, and whenever a creature card is put into an opponent's graveyard from anywhere, you gain 1 life. Yeah, Profane Memento, aggro decks, it'll help you. All right, speaking of more artifacts that are going to help you out here, we've got 2 Cursed Turtles coming at you again from Modern Horizons 2. It's a 2-cost artifact, and activated abilities of creatures can't be activated. So basically anything that needs an activation cost isn't happening. Walking Ballista, all that, you can take a walk. And last up, Torpor Orb. You got to have the Torpor Orb this day and age. For 2 colorless, you get an artifact that creatures in the battlefield don't cause abilities to trigger. With everything that just came out in Modern Horizons 2 and all the evoke costs for the creatures, Torpor Orb is just going to shut it down. Not to mention, humans is going to have a pretty big resurgence coming. I don't think people realize just how set up humans is to come back out of the gates. Torpor Orb is going to stop a lot of those creature shenanigans. Well, that's the deck. I hope you appreciated it. And again, if you enjoyed and learned anything, if you just like the sound of my voice, just go ahead and leave a like in the comments. We'll see you next time.